Let me ask you a question as we start this morning. What makes you valuable? Or can I ask it this way? What makes a person valuable to you? You see, the people that are valuable to us in friendship, we don't walk away from friendships we relish and value. Men and women don't divorce spouses that they value and they cherish. A business will do the best they can to hold on to an employee they value and treasure. Most of us who have had a really good friend, maybe a best friend, will never want to be without one because we understand their value. What makes a spouse so valuable that their mate will always sort of adore them? Well, Solomon is going to reveal some qualities in our text that we will study this morning that, when developed and nurtured, will make anybody highly valued by other people. And yet, there are two qualities in a person that will far outshine a man or woman's portfolio. Their value is priceless, and yet almost always underestimated. And I'm speaking there of truth, somebody who really will tell you the truth in love, in the right way, the truth to help you, not to hurt you. And the second component of kindness, someone who will always be kind to you. And the reason they're both important is because they are both on the heavy decline in our society. I read a story in the Wall Street Journal about a month ago that said more than 80% of high school seniors admitted they had recently cheated on exams. More than 80%. How would you like the doctor who was cutting on you and opening you up to do surgery to have cheated on his exams? Not a good thing. In the workplace, behavior was not any better. Honesty can become hard to come by. And people assume that because dishonesty often brings short-term advantages, that's why they're dishonest. That's why they won't tell the truth. That they think it brings short-term advantages. They assume that because they think that, it does not have significant negative consequences over the longer term. But nothing could be further from the truth. It does have consequences, and we'll see in the scripture today what some of those consequences are. And I talked about the school and business. It doesn't get much better at home. About a third of America's men have outwardly admitted cheating on their wives. And about a fourth of America's wives have outwardly admitted cheating on their husbands. So in today's instant gratification, me-first society, kindness seems a little bit more like a leftover at lunch than an entree. In other words, I'll take care of me first, and if I have any time left, I'll maybe be kind to others. Solomon immediately speaks about this early in the book. Never let loyalty and kindness leave you. Tie them around your neck as a reminder. Write them deep within your heart. Then you will find favor with both God and people, and you will earn a good reputation. So Solomon says, kindness truth, loyalty should be such a part of our lives that they're the first two attributes people notice about us, and they should never leave us. When others think of us, the first thought that should come to their mind is that person is kind, that person has integrity or loyalty, or is a truth teller. That's what he's saying here. But that's only the first half of Solomon's directive. The second half is, he said, write them on the tablet of your heart. In other words, make them a central part of who you are and what you are all about. Write them on the tablet of your heart. And that's not new for Solomon, by the way. Throughout the book of Proverbs, he makes conditional promises. If you do this, you will get that. And the same thing is true of truth and kindness. If we make those two qualities and characteristics a vital part of our lives, then we will gain a benefit no amount of money on earth can possibly buy. He tells us in Proverbs chapter 3 that we will receive the favor of men and women and of God, and that we will gain a good standing with men, women, and God. So knowing that you can rely on somebody's word, knowing that you can trust a friend or a family member, makes you feel safe. It makes you feel secure. And if you can't, the opposite is also true. If you know that you can't rely on a family member to be kind and to be honest, it will leave you very insecure. A person who routinely extends unexpected acts of kindness makes you value that relationship. That's why I asked you, what makes a person valuable to you? And whenever you're kind to somebody, it raises their level of commitment and loyalty to you and motivates them to follow your example by being kind towards you. This has been studied in a number of studies down through the last 30 years. It's also been studied in undocumented ways with across the country, days of kindness, weeks of kindness, and people suddenly are willing to show extraordinary kindness where they had not been maybe the day before. Knowing the incredible benefits to kindness and truth being put on the tablet of our hearts and then coming out of our hearts to other people, why would anybody then set them aside and go back to self-centeredness and dishonesty and disloyalty? The answer is pretty simple, actually. Our self-centeredness and our self-involvement are like a mental and emotional muscle that we have been exercising daily throughout our lives. It is truly the strongest muscle we have. Its reflexes are quick and powerful. Anytime we are confronted by a situation that gives us a choice between our own interest and simple kindness, our automatic response is to act the way our muscle memory has taught us. It will always focus our attention on what we need and want and desire. It's the same thing as weightlifting. Those of us who have done weightlifting through the years know that there is a time when your muscles get tired, but that's the same time when it is creating a muscle memory in you. And in some places, they call that the second wind. And you're able to really do even more than you thought you could, and do it automatically when a time arises when it is needed. If we, according to Solomon in this text verse this morning, write kindness and truth on the tablet of our heart like that, it will be the natural muscle memory that will come forward in our life. But it is a mental and emotional muscle that is exercised only when we make a conscious choice to do it, because it forces us to set aside our personal needs and desires long enough to focus on the genuine needs and desires of other people. And when we choose to use this muscle, we have to sometimes overpower our reflexive self-centeredness. Every day, every single day, every one of us in here face countless opportunities to choose between our own self-interest and kindness to someone else. And although it's not an easy task, the more we exercise this muscle of kindness, the stronger it becomes. And the stronger it becomes, the greater part of our inner core, those tablets written on our heart, it is. And over time, we will embrace it naturally with very little effort having been applied to do so. All right, so if Solomon says here in these verses that kindness and truth are what make you valuable, such important qualities, what keeps us from kindness and truth? This is where I wish we had a smaller classroom and I could just go around the room asking you, what do you think keeps you personally? I don't want a generic answer. What keeps you personally from being kinder or more honest and more truthful? Well, I can tell you there are several things that do. Pride is one of those things. Proverbs 13:10 states, "Pride leads to conflict. Those who take advice are wise." It's only by pride comes conflict or contention. But with the well-advised, there is wisdom. Now, our natural arrogance or pride is the instigator of more of our problems than probably any other source. Solomon says it's the chief cause of conflict, our pride. So before you engage in conflict, ask yourself, is your primary motive for pursuing an argument or a conflict simply to sustain or build up your own personal ego or to defend it when it has been attacked? If not, it's not a valid reason to start a fight or be drawn into a fight. It's just not. Solomon's suggestion, seek advice from those who are wise. Seek advice before being drawn into a conflict. He implies here that the wisdom gained from such a conflict will usually allow you to refrain from engaging in a big war, a big fight with other people. I have seen, and I really have seen, husbands and wives attack each other over nothing. And all I can think of is this has to have a deeper history than what I have just seen or heard. It must. I've seen children attack one another, especially my own grandchildren, over absolutely nothing. They were fine. They were perfect. They were little angels in 1 minute that in 10 or 15 seconds turned into little demons. How does that happen? Here again, Solomon simply says, don't do it. Save your arguments and your conflicts for real issues where genuine harm has been done or is going to be done, and the conflict is the only way out of it, the only way to resolve it. Instead, replace your pride with advice and wisdom. Why is it that we're not always kind and tell the truth? Well, another reason is because anger gets the best of us. Anger sometimes just sort of takes over, as Proverbs 13:18 says, a hot-tempered person starts fights, and a cool-tempered person stops them. Arguments are often started not because they are necessary, but because one party is angry, or one party has to be right, and it's their turn to prove right now that I'm right. And more times than not, that anger has nothing to do with the argument. If you are the person harboring anger, grapple with the issues that are fueling your anger before it destroys those valuable relationships in your life. And if the other person is the one carrying around unresolved anger, avoid being drawn into a conflict with him or her, even if it means limiting the amount of time that you spend with them. A couple of lessons ago, we already looked at what one of the Proverbs that Solomon wrote, which said, if you hang out with, I'm paraphrasing, if you hang out, I don't think Solomon said if you hang out, but anyway, if you hang out with angry people, you'll too become angry. And that's simply true. What keeps us from practicing kindness and truth? Harsh words. You ever know anybody, they have probably practiced this way all their life. They just can't help it. I have a person in mind that I know away from here that is just, they always think harsh words first. They always communicate harsh words first. I don't know whether it was the way they were raised. They just do. When Proverbs 15:1 says, a gentle answer deflects anger, but harsh words make tempers flare. All it takes to start or fuel a conflict is a single harsh statement or a few hurtful words. In most relationships, we know what buttons to push to start a fight. And we know the words and the statements that will push those buttons. And sometimes we do it on purpose, or at least I do, to have fun, just in a fun sense. One of my best friends in the world is sitting back there, Dr. Tom Walls, and we have a mutual friend in Nashville, and we have a text trio that goes on nonstop. And I think he would affirm that I am an instigator. Would you say that is true? Yes. I'm an instigator. I will often say something controversial or funny or hopefully appropriate that gets their dander up and gets them going. But I'm doing that for fun. I'm not doing that as a serious act. And if it turned serious at any point, any one of the three of us would cut it off. But the truth is, some people don't cut it off. Pushing buttons is what they like doing. They know where the buttons are. They know how to push them. They know how to start a fight. Solomon suggests that we take control of our mouth and use kind and gentle words to reduce tension rather than harsh words to stir it up. Here's another reason why we often are guilty of unkindful or dishonest behavior, and that is impulsiveness. Certainly not asking for a show of hands here. Please don't give a show of hands here. But how many of you think have ever told a lie impulsively? You really didn't have time to think about it very long. But impulsively, you answered something that you knew was not true. Well, I think that happens a lot. I do. Maybe about as much as any kind of lying. Most arguments are started impulsively. Few are carefully thought out beforehand and planned beforehand. Solomon warns that an argument or a conflict starting on impulse has a much greater likelihood of hurting you in the end than helping you in the end. He said, don't be in a hurry to go to court. For what will you do in the end if your neighbor deals you a shameful defeat? He's saying, take your time, study the situation, don't act impulsively. Stop and think about alternative courses of action. If you want to be valuable in other people's lives and you want to have valuable people in your life, Solomon kicked off this whole discussion in chapter 3 by saying you need to emphasize kindness and emphasize the truth. What keeps us from kindness and the truth? Meddling in other people's lives. Mostly because other people just don't want you meddling in their lives. unsolicited advice. Unsolicited advice is something most of us don't want. We like to get to the point where our hearts are open enough that we know when we need help and we ask the right people for help, like we talked about in last week's lesson. We have a Christian cabinet, people who are Christians and are smart in certain areas, and we need advice, so we go to them and get it. But what none of us, I think, usually like is unsolicited advice from people that we not only haven't asked, but maybe we don't want the advice from. Proverbs 26:17 says, interfering in someone else's argument is as foolish as yanking a dog's ears. It's only natural to try to help others in their conflicts. But as natural as that is, Solomon says that by doing so, you will be the one who gets bitten. Taking one's personal side against another without knowing all the issues, without knowing all the background, is a recipe for disaster. I experienced this a few years ago. One of my best friends was deeply hurt by one of the actions of one of his adult sons. And when I heard about it, I knew the son was wrong, and I wanted to lash out and jump on the phone and straighten him out. But I was wisely warned by my wife and another to stay out of it unless I was asked to intervene by either my friend or the boy. So I did stay out of it. A few months later, they reconciled. Everything got better. The relationship stronger than ever. Had I followed my impulses and stepped into their conflict, I almost certainly would have made their conflict worse. They weren't ready for it at that time. I would have harmed my relationship with my friend and harmed my relationship with his son in a way that would have lingered long after the conflict was resolved. Even when you are asked to intervene in someone else's conflict, do so only after a great deal of consideration and counsel. And never, I just did it this week. I've just done it this very week. Never be afraid to decline. To let the feuding parties know that it's really none of my business and this is not a good role for me right here. More often than not, that's probably the right course of action. I just had to do it this week. So, most people simply don't want you meddling in their own business. And that is what creates unkindness and dishonesty. Now, I want to ask you a question I want you to answer in your mind. It's another one I wish I could ask out loud and have you answer. Why is it so easy to lie? Why is it so easy to lie? Why is it so easy to, even as we used to call it, tell little white lies, which are really just little lies, which really turn into medium-sized lies, which really turn into big lies, which really turn into destruction? Why do we do it? Why do we lie? When most of us think of someone who is dishonest, we usually think of other people and rarely of ourselves. If I said, who do you know that is dishonest? I'd be willing to bet there would not be a person in this room that would first turn the finger back and go, well, I am to start off with. There you go. I'm at the top of that list. But the fact is, if one includes exaggerations and little lies and the conscious omission of relevant facts, most of us are guilty of dishonesty on a fairly regular basis. Why is it so easy to exaggerate or to bend the truth or to lie by omission, not tell the full story? Well, here's the answer. Because we think doing so, at least temporarily, puts us in a better position than telling the absolute truth. Now, I'm going to say that again, because I really believe this. Otherwise, we wouldn't lie. Somehow we have convinced ourselves that doing so temporarily puts us in a better position than telling the absolute truth would. There are really only three reasons to be dishonest, seriously. To promote ourselves, maybe making somebody else look bad. At their expense, we're promoting ourselves. To protect ourselves, because we know we've done something wrong. We don't want the hammer coming down on us. So to protect ourselves. Or to manipulate the thoughts and the feelings and the actions of others. Third category is probably the most likely reason. To manipulate the thoughts or actions or feelings of others. Those are the three reasons primarily why we lie. We think we're going to gain some kind of benefit when we're dishonest, but whatever we gain is almost always short-lived, and the consequences of being dishonest are so long-term, they ultimately outweigh any short-term gain, including trying to remember what we said, how we said it, keep all the details. And that's why police catch most criminals. They catch them in their own lies. They catch them in their own lives. They're trying to remember what they said over in this interview, and this interview, and this interview, and before long you've got inconsistencies and they've got a conviction. Each time we're dishonest, we become less sensitive to that internal conscience that Romans speaks of, and we create a greater capacity to lie next time. Each time we are dishonest and lie, we get some little gain out of it, either to protect ourselves or to promote ourselves, and we get away with it. We get a little more incentive to go a little further and do it a little more. And before long, it becomes part of who we are and how we interact with the world. So, in my opinion, dishonesty comes in two forms. Distorting the truth, that's obvious, and hiding the truth. They're both dishonest. The first is obvious. The second may not be quite as obvious. What are some of the ultimate consequences of dishonesty, of not telling the truth, that we may not see until it's just a bit too late? Well, the biggest one is, deep down inside, you carry a hidden fear that one day your dishonesty will be exposed. Do you know how many people are carrying around that fear? That one day they'll be exposed. You know, you have to always keep your story straight. You don't know who you're going to run into that may know the truth. Dishonesty always forces you to think about your past lies so you won't say anything at all that might contradict or expose those lies. All of that creates stress, and we've already seen that stress not only robs us of any potential for joy, it ultimately steals our health as well. Dishonesty, not good for us. Every year there are a number of train wrecks, plane crashes, and car accidents. And yet no one ever boards a train or a plane or steps into a car thinking they're about to be in a traumatic or fatal crash. Likewise, nobody ever tells a lie or hides the truth, thinking that doing so is going to destroy the very life they're trying to enjoy. But it does. Sooner or later, nearly all dishonesty is discovered by others. What's that verse in Numbers 32:23? I'll start it, and you see if you can finish it. Be sure your sins will find you out. I heard a handful of people. Be sure your sins will find you out. Sooner or later, nearly all dishonesty is discovered. It's discovered immediately by God, which is what Numbers 30:23 is talking about, but usually discovered by others too. Now let's talk about a third. We've talked about kindness and truth. Let's talk about a third quality that makes you invaluable, and that is generosity. Generosity is a quality that gives more than it gets. And Proverbs said this about that: give freely and become more wealthy. Be stingy and lose everything. The generous will prosper. Those who refresh others will themselves be refreshed. I know a lot of us in modern society look at that and say that I just don't believe that. I don't believe. We're cynical about that statement. A lot of us in modern society look at that and think, I just don't believe that. I just don't believe that if I give freely, I become more wealthy. You know, there's only one way that you can really believe that. And that is all in on God. All in on God. Now, I might also add that wealthy there doesn't have to mean just money, but it most likely does. But you can be wealthy in other ways as well, as stingy. The generous will prosper. It's a quality that makes you valuable to other people. When a child, I watched this on the Wink News a couple of weeks ago, when a child donates his hard-earned allowance to a disaster relief effort, it was just a picture of this verse. I'll just bet you that child turns out being glad that he did that and being rewarded for having done that. When a businessman donates $1 million to charity, we feel appreciation for those who are generous. But admiration and appreciation aren't the only benefits of generosity. In addition to heartfelt joy experienced whenever you meet the needs of other people, Solomon promises that those who are this way won't lack for anything. Their true needs will be provided. They will prosper. He even tells us that those who give generously to others will gain back even more as they give. Sounds illogical. Sounds impossible. But think about it in this way. Think about it in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, his old chart, which tells us that there are two greatest motivating persons in a person's life are a desire for gain and a fear for loss. What motivates almost all of us is either a desire for gain financially, gain in our job, whatever, however you define gain, a desire for gain and a fear of loss. I am you probably tilt in your personality and your psyche toward one or the other being the stronger within you. With me, it's the fear of loss that is far and away the strongest of these. But the point of his hierarchy, which has lasted now for about 80 years and has turned out to be pretty true, is that you are not capable really of moving up here to the very highest forms of you, like love and belonging and friendship and intimacy and sense of connection and respect and self-esteem and status and recognition and certainly self-actualization, the best that one can be. You are nowhere near capable of getting up there until categories 1 and 2 are met. And you notice they're titled differently. They're titled needs. These aren't wants. These aren't desires. These are absolute needs. Air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, reproduction, personal security, employment, resources, health, property. Needs. Once you get those 2 steps of needs done, then you can move up into here and become one who is generous in helping, giving back to other people, not just be one who has been taking for yourself. A lot of truth to it. So what does Solomon mean when he talks about generosity? Well, collectively, the word that he uses implies that a generous person is one who freely gives a significant portion of what he has to meet the needs of others. And he does so with no expectation of receiving. This is not a quid pro quo. He does so with no expectation of receiving something in return. And although he's speaking primarily of being generous financially and materially, generosity isn't limited to that. Being generous means focusing on the needs of people in those steps 1 and 2. Whether it's with money or deeds or emotional support or assistance or housing or all those steps 1 and 2 on Maslow's chart. And those who are not generous ever, Solomon flat out says they will fall into poverty. I have witnessed that. Not necessarily financial or material poverty, though that too, but great poverty of the soul. Never satisfied with what they have, constantly need more, become emotionally bankrupt. And the reason they become emotionally bankrupt is because generosity, like kindness and truth, start in the heart and have to be written in the heart, as Proverbs 3 and 4 said. It always takes action, generosity does. It is never passive. One final quality before we close out today, and that is graciousness, an attitude that raises you up in the sight of others. I love Proverbs 11, 16, and 17. A gracious woman gains respect, but ruthless men gain only wealth. Your kindness will reward you, but your cruelty will destroy you. According to Solomon, the one quality that will bring you glory and honor and attractiveness that is best described is the word graciousness. Now, what does Solomon mean by the word gracious? Well, the Hebrew word that he used literally means all these things that I've listed for you on the board. It's marked by kindness and courtesy, by tact and delicacy. It's characterized by charm. Have you ever had somebody just charm you into their web? I have. And it has good taste and generosity of spirit. And although Solomon, I hope you notice this, although he used this word to refer to women, that may be because in his eyes, those qualities seem to be more naturally inherent in women than men. I think that's right. But they're rare qualities in both sexes. I'm constantly surprised by the impatient, rude, and sometimes crass behavior that seem to be commonplace in our society today. I was right across the street at this Publix a few weeks ago, and a lady grabbed her son. We were in the aisle, we were in the checkout aisle, and he grabbed her son, and she just pulled him off, still in the aisle, right in the full attention of everybody else, and just wore that boy out. I mean, right in front of everybody. And I felt bad for the kid. And I remembered back to a time when there was a Publix, some of you old-timers will remember, 30, 35 years ago, where Broadway Palm Dinner Theater is right now. How many of you remember when that was there, where Broadway Palm was? And Scott remembers this as one of his most memorable times of childhood. He had got on my very last nerve in line. I pulled the cart out of the line. I took it to the back. I parked the cart outside the bathroom. And he and I went in the bathroom and had a little attitude adjustment. And he still remembers that. He's 40-something. He still remembers that to this day. But I wasn't going to do it in front. I didn't make a big deal of it while I was doing it. I didn't jerk the cart and, I just simply took him back there and did the business. And one of the worst things you can do is have crass, rude behavior that shows character that is not quite developed yet. And it is so commonplace today. The good news is that graciousness is not a personality type. It's a choice anybody can make. And the first step to becoming gracious is to become grateful. Solomon would have us be grateful for everything we have every day of our life. When we are constantly aware of everything we have is a gift from God, from whom He is above, with no shadow of turning, as James 1:17 says, it creates within us a gracious spirit. It creates within us the choice of being patient when you're feeling impatient. The choice to extend kindness when you really feel angry, when you really feel like giving somebody what they deserve. You don't give them what they deserve any more than you're glad God doesn't give you what you deserve. It is the choice to tactfully and gently correct someone instead of criticizing them. It is the choice to extend appreciation even when you don't really feel like it. It is the choice to do all of this not as a quid pro quo, expecting anything in return. And as you develop those characteristics, it will make you, as the first screen said, valuable. Really valuable in the eyes of others, and it'll make others really valuable in your eyes as well.